20th century. Now, Friedan is now 82 and stooped and in failing health, and she leaned across the lunch table. She stopped eating her ravioli, and she told me something that I want to share with you tonight. She said, you can use everything. You can use defeat as well as victory. You can use failure as well as success. May those words fortify you when someone higher up in the chain of command orders you to be careful about what you say, and what you do, and what you write. Thank you very much. Go Cyclones. Are we taking questions? Or?
Yes. If you have any questions for David, please raise your hand and David can take it from there. There's a mic right in the middle there, Bill.
You've pasted most of American major media pretty broadly with your criticism. What's your take on perhaps the objective reporting on public broadcasting?
I think public broadcasting is incredibly cautious. I don't know if you ever watch the NewsHour as I do regularly. I'm always shocked by what they don't say as well as what they do. And I'll give you an example about public broadcasting. And we should remember that the public airwaves are our airwaves. We own them, yet we allow a lot of what goes on with the non-public, with the mainstream media to go on. But let's talk about the public broadcasting. Let's talk about public radio. Recently, a knitting serial, a columnist in California, the biggest station in California, she did an essay about a 5-part series on knitting. She was, wrote about different parts of life, but she did her knitting thing. Her name was Sandra Singh Low. And Sandra is a well-known novelist as well. And she inadvertently said the word fuck on the air. They were supposed to bleep it out. It was part of a gag, and it didn't get bleeped out for whatever reason. And public radio not only fired her, they deleted her entire 11 years archive of her contributions to the public radio station from their website. So you tell me, do you think that the public media, the public broadcasting service, isn't affected by the current chill in the airwaves? I would argue that they are. Do they do a better job than commercial media in bringing attention to important subjects? Oh, absolutely. I don't think anyone would question that. But are they tamer than they need to be? You bet. And if let's think back just about our public museums. Remember how the Smithsonian had to run when they had somehow, offended the politically correct. I think it was something to do with the Enola Gay, and they were all scared. And look, believe me, if the public broadcasting, both TV and radio, they're still reliant on the government for a lot of their funding, despite viewers like you and me.
15% as well.
Well, you don't think that's significant?
15%.
And is that not significant? You don't think that 15% causes a chill? I do. Well, we differ.
I'm curious to know if
Do you wanna-
you...
Just so in case people...
I'm curious to know whether you have any feelings on foreign media, whether there is actually a true credible source somewhere, either, I guess, inside or outside the United States. Does that thing exist?
I'm not saying that the American media is a shambles, okay? I'm saying that there are problems, and I'm giving them a kick in the pants today, okay? The idea of the book was not only to educate readers about maybe what they're getting to read, but what they're not. But it was also, the hope of the book was to maybe make editors think twice before they kill a story that was worthy. So I don't want you to think, first of all, that there's not great journalism that's going on, including public journalism. public broadcasting. We're seeing great journalism from the New Yorker and wonderful. I just picked up The Atlantic. It's a magazine you should all read. The Atlantic Monthly is so compelling. And the New York Times, despite my arguments with it, they still do a phenomenal job. But I do think that we have a wonderful opportunity now as news consumers to be more aggressive in the way we get news. Foreign media. We have opportunities to read The Guardian, and I would argue that's on the left, and on the right, I think The Telegraph does a good job of London. So I would look at those. I would look at, in Australia, on the right, AFR, the Australian Financial Review. On the left, the Sydney Morning Herald. I would look at the New Zealand Herald. I would look at English language media. There's a wonderful website. I'm going to try and remember it. Okay, yeah. The American Journalism Review has a website, and I think it's just newslink.org. I don't even think it's www, oddly. It's just like HTTP, then newslink.org. But if you go and put in Google the American Journalism Review, you'll find it. Now, that has links to almost every major newspaper, both in America as well as alternative weeklies. And then it also has links to every type of foreign media you can imagine. And I think we need to realize that we're not getting the full story. I'm not saying we're getting half the story when we read our daily newspaper, but maybe we're getting 3/4 of our story. And I worry about the other 25% that we're not getting. And here's something else to just think about foreign news. We do need to be more aggressive as news consumers, because for the most part, our daily newspapers are acting in a where still about half of Americans get their news. We're generally in one-paper towns today, except for Denver, New York, Seattle, and San Francisco marginally, and Chicago, and maybe a couple others. We're in one-paper towns. And those one-paper towns, those newspapers are focused. They're usually part of a chain, and they're focused on growth in sales. They might as well be selling widgets, okay? And they're looking for over 20% growth. That's more than manufacturers make. And we've closed down a lot of our foreign bureaus. ABC News now reports on all of Europe just from their London bureau, including Russia. The daily newspapers are relying on a few sources, and again, big corporations, Reuters and AP, and to a lesser extent, Agence France-Presse. So there's like 3 companies providing us with much of the foreign news we're getting, if we're getting any foreign news at all. Because certainly foreign reporting is really expensive, you know. And I guarantee you that a media fixated on dollars, and I'm not a communist. I understand that we need advertisers to pay the bills. I just think that if we put out a great publication, the advertisers will come to us. And we should worry a little less about focus groups. We should provide what we know in our hearts as journalists is important and great. So be aggressive. Be more demanding. Challenge yourselves. Go on the internet, go online, and find alternate sources. And do read TalkingPointsMemo.com, which is a great blog written by a top-notch reporter, and Instapundit.com. And Reason.com, they're a little crazy. They're libertarians with a big L, but they have wonderful stories that you can read, that totally alternative. Not only that, if you go to AAN.org, AAN.org allows you to read every alternative weekly, pretty much, at least major 50 or 100 of them, all throughout the country. So that's another great way to get another source of news. But you know what? It's funny. You know, I notice even the alternative weeklies. I try to market foreign news to them, and all I hear is local, 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 local. And that's all they're looking for, because they're trying to sell whatever ads for escort services and local bars and the psychic healer. And it's a challenge even I'm not saying that alternative weeklies aren't deserving of some scorn. That's my gig, and I'm the scorn man tonight. So, I mean, obviously, I think I try to, to provide the most egregious examples of what's going on tonight. But I just want to tell you a little story from my own experience about reporting. Just a little thing, just to give you an idea of some of the things that go on. It's not always, the big stories that get killed. So my professor, when I went to college, I took a journalism class, and his name was Ed Diamond. He's unfortunately gone. But Ed wrote a book that was, I'm talking somewhat harsh about the New York Times. It was a history of the Times. I think it was Behind the Times or something. You can look it up. But I quoted him subsequently in an article I wrote for one of the sections of the newspaper. And my editor, when we went over our edit, he said, we don't quote Ed Diamond in the New York Times. And I said, what? He was persona non grata at the New York Times, and his view, because of a newsroom grudge, was no longer viable. So, I mean, I've learned in several ways. I did another story, I'll just tell you. I didn't put any of my own stories in the book because I didn't think it would be fair. But I did a story for the Washington Post. I used to write a monthly column in their travel section. And it was an interview. It was a Q&A interview with a weird figure from the travel world, including a guy who, I remember one, was a guy who did a book on the creepiest things in the world you can eat, including puppies. But I interviewed, they put that one in, but they only killed one of my interviews ever. And it was an interview with a guy named Stephen Jacobson, I believe. And he was the director of an organization called Fair Trials Abroad. And what Fair Trials Abroad did is if you, let's say, were in Mexico and you smoked some pot and they caught you, and you were thrown into a Tijuana jail, these guys would try to help you and provide you with legal assistance for travelers in trouble. Well, this gentleman had a very particular grudge against the Bush administration because of the treatment of the detainees at Guantanamo. He viewed them as travelers, deprived of their rights. Look, I'm not going to necessarily agree or disagree. I'm going to say it's a fair point to make. It's a point to make. And that was the one. And he also said that he gave it. He said Bush was a liar, basically, in the piece. And that was the one piece, the one interview I'd done over years, and the last piece I've done for them, really, that they killed. So, I mean, I've given you some examples of some of the more profound ramifications. I hope you're still with me. I want to give you one more tale. It's not in this country, but it's in England, about a story that mattered that got spiked. It was in 1973, and you'll forgive me if I get the dates wrong. And it was after Bloody Sunday in Londonderry, Northern Ireland. And a reporter was there, and he investigated a bullet-by-bullet account of what went on there, which was the massacre of 13 unarmed protesters by British troops. They were peaceful protesters, they were unarmed, and they were gunned down. And I think the reporter in his essay, or report, it was 5,000 words, or as long, he said it was the single biggest victory of the IRA since their formation in 1916. And the British government leaned on, I think it was the Times of London at that time. They leaned on them, and they pressured them, and they killed the story. Not only did they kill the story, but the actual, at that point, stories were phoned in. They weren't, on laptops and records. That story disappeared from the newsroom for 26 years. It was found a couple years ago. And it was like out of a Graham Greene novel. And that story, in my opinion, which would have shocked the British people, because they were being fed a lot of crap, I think it would have made a difference at the time, making at least the English reader think about whether it was a sane policy, the British government's foreign policy towards Northern Ireland. So there are, yes, smaller stories that get killed, and that you might not think they matter, but I suppose there's a lot of great stories that we don't even know about that get killed. You know what even happens is we don't even, at this point with the media, it's sort of a preach to the choir journalism that's being practiced. And I think that reporters on both sides of the aisle, those who write for more left-leaning publications, those who write for the right, they don't even offer stories now. There's sort of a preemptive strike in some ways. They don't even offer the stories to publications anymore because you just think that there's political bias as sort of a standard operating procedure, and that's a shame. I've talked you out.
Well, we appreciate your coming here, David. We appreciate your good advice.
Thank you.